Hey everybody, Francis Buckley here, introducing my new series of videos called How Stuff Works. And in this series of videos, what we're going to cover is we're going to cover just about everything in your studio and talk about how it works and how it's connected and how you can get the most out of it. Right? But you got to start somewhere. So we're going to start with one of the most basic parts of the studio, the room itself. All right. Now, one of the main things that you need to understand when you're setting up your room is you need to understand the concept of balance and symmetry. Okay? What that means is you need to be in the room in a balanced way so that your speakers have the same amount of space around each one, so you're not crammed over in the corner, so one speaker is bouncing off a wall and the other speaker is playing out into the rest of the room, right? So the best way to do that, the way that I suggest that you do it, is you get yourself a piece of paper and a pencil, right? And you draw an overhead view of your room. And you want to take into account everything physically part of the room, not the furniture. Don't worry about that. That's for another thing. But you want to take into consideration windows, doors, closets, alcoves, odd shape of the room or whatever. Right? So that now you have that drawn out, you can look down at it and you can get a pretty good idea of where would be the best place in the room to set up. Okay. Now this room is 11 by 16. This is a pretty standard kind of large home bedroom, if you will. But this room was specifically built for a recording studio. It has a floating floor and it's room within room. Right? But the biggest thing to understand about your room is there's always going to be something that you can't overcome. You can't move walls, you can't move neighbors, you can't raise the ceiling. You got to kind of work in the physical space that you have. All right? So what I'm talking about with the balance and symmetry in the room has to do with my speakers sitting right here. They're about 2 feet away from me and they're about 2 feet apart, right? But it's about 3.5 feet from this speaker to that wall, and it's 3.5 feet from this speaker to that wall. And it's 10 inches from that speaker to the wall behind it, and it's 10 inches from that speaker to the wall behind it. So in this space of 3 walls, these speakers are set balanced in there. Same amount of time for the sound to go from this speaker to hit that wall and this speaker to hit that wall. That means the stuff is reflecting around in the room in a little bit more balanced way. All right? So once you find that spot as to where you can set your speakers, that you do have a nice even space around it, now you need to determine where you're going to sit in the room. Right? Now, the one thing you don't want to do, don't want to get yourself set in the middle of the room. It's usually not a very good listening spot. Right? Now, in this room, the middle of the room would be somewhere back about here. Right? But I want my listening space up here. Right? So what I have to do now in order to finish the setup of the speakers is use what we call the magic triangle. And the magic triangle is simply the distance from one speaker to the other and the distance from the speaker out to me. And what we form is an equilateral triangle. It's 2 feet from that speaker to that speaker. It's 2 feet from that speaker to me. It's 2 feet from me to that speaker. So I'm sitting on a perfect equilateral triangle. All right? And that really is all there is to setting up speakers. Now, yeah, there's you want to make sure that your speakers are at ear level, right? I'm sitting here, my ear is like sort of right in between the woofer and the tweeter of my speakers. Right. Also, when I'm in the sweet spot, which is the apex of the triangle, and I look at the speaker, all I see is the face of the speaker. I don't see the sides, the top. I just see the face of the speaker. That means it's pointing right straight at me. Same with the right speaker. When I look at it, all I see is the front. So these speakers are now pointing right into my listening position. All right? So that's getting your speaker set in the room. Next, what you want to do is bring in your furniture. Right? Because that's another thing that's going to have a real big impact on your room and how everything is set up. So bring in your furniture. Now, the one thing I would caution you about, if you bring a piece of furniture into the room that causes you to have to move one of your speakers to use that piece of furniture, well, sorry, that piece of furniture either needs to be modified or it's got to go. Because the setup of the speakers is the most important thing. All right? So You bring your desk in, right? And this is the time to start thinking about your workspace. Okay. First of all, you want to keep it organized. So you bring in your desk and you get it nicely set up. Now is the time to think about things like a good chair. You got a good chair? You're going to need one. You're going to be sitting in it a lot, right? And good lighting. Can you see? Do you have a way that maybe if you needed, you could turn on really big lights so you can really see what's going on in the room? Or do you have ways that you could bring in mood lighting, lamps, or whatever it is you need to create the creative atmosphere of your studio? All right, so now you've got your furniture set up. Now it's time to start bringing in your gear. Now, one of the things that I always say about setting up a studio is you're always going to set it up twice. You're going to set it up the way you think it should be, and then after you use it a little bit, you're going to set it up again to the way it really should be, right? So what I do is I try to sort of wrap those two things up into one, and I bring all my equipment in and I set it where I think it should go. Right? I have a rack with gear down here, right? I also have a rack in the back that has gear in it, right? So what I do is I set everything up and I kind of go through the motions. I kind of go, okay, I got a vocalist out there and I'm doing this and I'm working with this piece of gear and I'm working over here. Let's say, for instance, that you thought it would be really cool to put your mic pre's in a rack on this side. Right. Well, okay, that might not be a bad idea, except for the fact that you might be sitting here working your DAW, and now you've got to get to the mic pre really quick. That means you've got to roll all the way over here to grab the mic pre. Right? Well, as you can see, mine are right here. Here's my 8 mic pre's right here. And I can reach over and grab any one of them very quickly to do what it is that I need to do. So put your stuff in the rack. Don't hook it up. Don't put any wires, nothing. Just look at it. Just work it. Just go, how would this be if I was doing a session? Okay, so now that you've got that done, and again, what I'm sure you're going to find is that you thought that the way you were going to set it up is now probably a little bit different. You might even find that after you get going that you might want to rearrange it again. All right, so now you got it set up. Now it's time to hook it up. So the first consideration when you're going to start hooking up your gear is power. Where are you going to plug it in? Right? Now, most of my stuff is not up against the walls. So that means there's going to be cables going from this rack back to the wall and from this stuff back to the wall and all the other equipment, right? So I got to have power. You also might want to consider, some of this equipment draws some power. So you might want to see that all of your equipment is not all on the same circuit. The way I had this room built, my front wall is one circuit. My side walls are 2 other circuits, so I have 4 circuits on the back wall. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different circuits that I can plug stuff in and distribute that power a little bit more evenly. Okay? Now, once you figured out where your power is going to go, if you can, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. If you can keep your power cables and your audio cables separate, it's always a good idea. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It's just, having power cables and audio cables next to each other can sometimes cause problems with hums and buzzes and ground loops and things like that. Right? So now you're actually going to start hooking things up. And one of the things that I want to caution you about is when you do your cabling. Okay, what I've always found is that if I cut the cable exactly the length that I need it, I'm going to need it a little bit longer. So I measure, I go, okay, my interface is 5 feet from my computer, so I'm going to put a 7-foot cable. I'm going to leave me a couple of feet because I'm probably going to want to move that stuff, right? Other thing you want to do if you have a rack, like say for instance, I have this rack right here. All of this stuff has what's called a service loop in it. Right? So if there was something wrong or if I wanted to pull this piece of equipment out, I just take the screws out, pull it out, and I can reach behind it and pull the cables off because there's enough cables in here for me to pull this thing all the way out and then get to the cables in the back. And then when I'm ready to put it back in, I just leave the cables hanging. When I'm ready to put it back in, I take the cables, plug them in the back, drop the thing back in, and I'm ready to go. All right? Now, word about cables. Okay? There's nothing you're going to do in your room that isn't going to travel through some kind of a cable, right? The most important ones would be the ones with which you are going to record with, right? Now, the cool thing with cables is that, they're usually a one-time purchase, right? Cables for my studio, I got them one time. I don't have to go out and rebuy my cables all the time. Cables don't wear out. So good cables is a really good investment because every bit of your sound is going to have to travel through cabling. Right? Now, what makes good cabling? Well, price could be one indicator, but it's not always. Right? It's understanding what's going on inside the cable. What you would want to look for is you would want to look for as close to 100% pure copper as you can get. I think 99.9% pure copper, right? And also oxygen-free copper. Because what that means is the purer the copper and the less oxygen, molecules of oxygen that are in the cable itself, the easier it is for the electrons to move along the cable. Right? So good cabling is a good investment. It's really a good investment. I mean, it surprises me sometimes to see people who will go out and buy a $1,500 microphone and hook it up with a $10 cable. It's like, yeah, it might work, but, you know. So invest in your cables. It's a good place to spend money on your studio. All right, so now we've got everything all cabled up the way we want it. We've gone through a little bit of a mock session and said, hey, this works and that works and this works, and we're ready to go. Okay, so now we want to do some listening, right? And what's going to be involved in listening is to determine what do we need to do in this room, right? Because, you know, people always ask me, what should I do in my studio, or my home studio? Say, you mean to the room? Right? What do I need to do to my room? And I always say, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that you're going to need to do something. Because if you're doing anything in a home, even this studio, right, it still has things that I can't overcome, right? So the biggest thing in the studio is that, or I mean in a home, is that none of the rooms were designed for music, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to do some listening tests. Now this is where you're going to need some kind of reference material. Okay? What is reference material? Well, reference material is something to listen to, right? So what I suggest for reference material is any commercially released piece of music that you want to use. I caution you to stay away from using your own material for reference because you're too inside your own material. Right? You don't like the hi-hat sound. You didn't like this. I didn't quite get the mix I wanted. All that other stuff. You're too inside of it. So use somebody else's stuff. Right? For me, what I use is Michael Jackson's Billie Jean for a great many reasons. The biggest reason of all, great album, great songwriting, great production, great playing, great engineering, great mastering. It's just a really, really, really well done piece of music, right? Now, I also use Billie Jean because I know it so well. I've heard it since the day it came out. I've listened to it on the radio, in my car, in my studio, and studios all over the world, right? And I bring Billie Jean in and I put it on and I listen to it, right? Now, if I walk into a studio and Billie Jean sounds like this, then we've got a problem in the studio because Billie Jean does not sound like this. Billie Jean sounds like this, right? If the kick drum is kind of going, okay, I know we got some low-end problems in the room because the kick drum on Billie Jean is really poppy, right? If the bass, if I don't really get that boom, 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 and if I can't hear the secondary bass part, then I know I've got low-end problems in the room. So Billie Jean becomes my reference as to what does this room sound like? Because if you walk into a room and you have no idea what's going on in the room and you start working, you could walk out of there with some really, really, really weird sounding tracks. So the reference track gives you an idea of what's going on in the room. And like I said, I can put Billie Jean on, and before Michael gets to the first chorus, I can tell you everything that's going on in the room. And it makes it quite easy for me to listen. It gives me confidence in what's going on in the room because I have a point of reference. All right? So you're going to get your reference material, but the first thing you want to do is decide, do I really need to do something in the room? Because that's not outside the realm of possibility that maybe you don't. Right? So you put your Billie Jean on or whatever you're going to listen to, and you're going to start listening to it. Right? And really starting to take note about what am I hearing, what am I not hearing, what's being accentuated, what's being lost, right? If you don't get that nice satisfying bottom end out of it, then something's being lost in your bottom end, right? So now that you've got a little bit of an idea, like maybe you're sitting in this position and you're going, I'm not quite sure what I got going on here. This is where you could go to your oscillator, your signal generator. And almost every DAW I've ever worked with has a signal generator as part of its plug-in collection. All right, so you take your signal generator, you turn it on, you pump it out through your speakers, and you start at 20 hertz, which is the theoretical low range of our hearing. Right? You got a piece of paper and a pencil, and you start at 20 hertz, and you go 20 hertz, not very loud, of course. 30 hertz, a little bit louder. And you go through and you compare one to the other. 60 hertz is louder than 50 hertz, and 70 hertz is quieter than 50 hertz, and 80 hertz is there. And you go through and you can start to see where you have troubles in the room. Right? Also, you may be sitting in this position, you start to get up into those high frequencies, and high frequencies just completely disappear. So what that's telling you, if you're starting to have frequencies disappear, is that now you've got reflection problems going on. And that's where we start talking about our panels and our diffusers. All right? So how do I determine where I put panels? Well, the best way is to do what we call trying to find the angle of first reflection. The angle of first reflection is exactly what the name says it is. It's the first point that the music from this speaker is going to hit that wall, or where the music from that speaker is going to hit that wall. And the way I find it is I sit in the sweet spot. I sit in the apex of the triangle, and I get a friend to take a mirror and put a mirror on the wall. And as I'm sitting here, they're going to move the mirror from behind the speakers, slowly move it forward until I can see the right speaker in the mirror on the left wall, right? And I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to put a piece of tape there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to have the person stand over there with the mirror and slowly start to come forward until I see the left speaker in the mirror on the right wall. And that's where I'm going to put my little piece of tape to tell me that's my angle of first reflection. Okay. Now, angle of second reflection would be where it hits the wall, bounces and hits it. Well, that's going to be way the other side of that wall. So I don't really have an angle of second reflection in here. But what I do have is a back wall, right? So what I've got on the back wall, these are what are known as diffusers, right? And diffusers, what they do is, like these panels here, these guys back over here, these are absorbers. The sound is going to go in there and get absorbed. The ones on the back are diffusers, which means it's going to diffuse the sound. So what happens is the sound is going to travel to the back wall, and without those, it would hit the back wall and bounce right back into my listening position. Well, with the diffusers back there, I got skyline diffusers on the top and quadratics down here, right? They're going to hit that, and there's all kinds of different levels of that. The skyline diffusers have 1, 2, 3, and 4-inch pieces of wood. The quadratics have each of those black strips is a different depth. So the sound goes there and hits that wall and gets broken up and doesn't bounce right back into my listening position. Right? Now with these panels on the side wall, right, what I've got here, this is the panel that's the panel of the first reflection. Okay? And it's about the height of my ears. They're a little high right now because I had pieces of equipment underneath there and I moved them out, so I might actually drop them a little bit. Right? I want them at least so that this much of me is covered by that panel. Right? I mean, could the panel go floor to ceiling? Sure could. Right? Most of them are 2 feet by 4 feet, so that's the common ones that you're going to find. Right? Now, if you have nothing on your floor, like mine, you can see mine are hardwood floors. Right? So I have overhead what's called a cloud. And the cloud is literally just follows the angle of those panels, and it's just up on the ceiling. And that's all it is, and it's just to keep the sound from boom coming and bouncing right back down at me. All right? So now you have got your studio set up, you got yourself balanced in the room, you got your speakers set up properly, you got your furniture in, looking good, right? You've figured out your listening position, right? You've sat here, you've done your listening test, you put your equipment together, you got everything hooked up, and you're ready to go, right? So next time, we're going to start talking about a concept that you really need to get your brain wrapped around in order to make all this stuff work, and that's the concept of busing. It's not difficult at all. We're going to get into it. That's for the next episode. All right, I'm Francis Buckley. See you next time. Thanks for coming by.